What's up, everybody? This is the Booch, and welcome to episode 18 of the Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring. Once again, this week I am joined by the AEW correspondent, singer-songwriter, the one and only Mr. Desmond Dagenhart.
Thank you very much.
And, of course, my Part 1 co-host and the other AEW correspondent.
Ichigo.
Yes, a.k.a. Mr. Elvis Dolinski.
They call me Shut Up Excalibur. No, I'm joking. Welcome back to the show. I'm wearing a mask. We're not practicing the 6 feet distance we're supposed to be doing. But at the same time, here we are. I am risking COVID to do the show with you guys. So I hope you enjoy Brian Pillman, Part 2, Episode 18. For your YouTube pleasure. Vinny, take it away.
Absolutely. Now, when we last left here last week, we were talking about Brian was on track to becoming one of the biggest stars in wrestling by convincing people that he was, breaking insider terms, doing a bunch of crazy stuff. He was basically playing both sides for money. WWE, WCW, trying to negotiate and get himself the best deal possible. And then he ends up in a car accident in an $80,000 Humvee.
Because the price of the vehicle is what really matters here.
Well, yeah.
Well,
that's not about the price meant something here because this is a guy who's talking about, I need to make all this money because I got 5 kids I got to take care of, and you buy an $80,000 car?
Well, I mean, he's got to live
at this point, though, let's be realistic. He was making the money.
Yeah, but his arrogance got the better of him, and he crashes, and he had to be airlifted to the university hospital. His sister ended up going to the hospital, which for her was a flashback to when
Where was Melanie?
Brian was a kid and the pops in the throat. Melanie eventually shows up.
She was in Florida.
I think so.
Let's clarify that.
Yeah, she was in Florida.
With the kids.
With the kids, yeah.
Okay.
So but she shows up and didn't recognize Brian because his hair was red from all the blood.
She's like, that's not my husband. Oh, hell no. That's not my husband. It's like, you're Flying Brian, right? Like, the wrestler, the guy who played for Cincinnati Bengals, right? We remember him. Oh, I guess he's mine. Okay. What's wrong with him? His face is peeling off.
Yeah, they had him in a neck brace. His head swelled up like a beach ball, and his eyes were completely red.
She was completely turned off.
Oh, yeah.
And she's like, oh, man, his body's okay, right? Like, it's cool? Like, no, his leg's kind of torn up.
Yeah. They had 6 different doctors operating on his face. One did the forehead, one did the lower mandible, one did the upper, one did the nose,
so
and did the eye
6
sockets.
different doctors for different portions, right? The forehead, the cheeks, and all that. So they had a whole staff team. It's like, okay, well, could one person do it? Yeah, but we're going to separate this. This is a long process. We're going to take, let's just peel back his face like Face Off with, John Travolta. And,
yeah.
The other guy's name. Nicolas Cage, obviously. Face Off. They had a whole operation going on. They got his face back. And remember all the rumors swirling around that he's like, oh, is this guy getting plastic surgery to look like Shawn Michaels to be his mirror match type thing?
Yeah, they thought he was going to be the evil twin of Shawn Michaels.
Which would have been fucking awesome if they did it.
And the thing is,
I'm just saying,
people believed that shit.
I mean, like, it's rumors because, like, all the boys are saying it, all the reporters are saying it, so it's like, I mean, everything he does, it's kind of fucking wacky and crazy. If you live the gimmick long enough, you become that gimmick.
He can pull it off.
Yeah, and that's been the one and only, and we notice this, and from all the Dark Side of the Rings that we've done, you notice this is an ongoing pattern in wrestling, that's this. The one disadvantage about preserving kayfabe is that when something really happens to you, or something really happens in the ring, nobody believes it's real. They all believe it's a work until it's too late.
It's the boy who cried wolf to the nth degree.
Exactly. We've seen it happen. It happened with everything from Bruiser Brody to storylines in the ring like that to Montreal to freaking the love triangles in the ring with Matt Hardy and Edge and everything. Like, all of it was real, but people didn't believe it.
Yeah, when you live into the character, it's crazy. Like, I like to bring up Hunter S. Thompson, the guy from the Fear and Loathing movies.
Yeah.
So that guy, I mean, he wrote for Rolling Stone, did a whole bunch of drugs, and lived this crazy character. But then, after a while, he had to keep living that character, because every time he was going on TV, he was going and doing all these press releases. People expected that character to be there. So Hunter wasn't Hunter anymore. He was just this caricature of himself, and he had to live it up, though. So, I mean, like, you get lost in the narrative of who you really are, you lose yourself. And he lost himself. Yeah. He was brilliant when it came to his angle, but at the same time, he put all his eggs in one basket and supposed to grow, and it's like his seed he planted to get himself to the next level, pretty much, and he had to live that character, and you couldn't like not do that.
Yeah. And not only that, his face was shattered. They put the metal plates in his face. They had to peel the scalp back to make the incision and peeled his face down to put the plates in. So we literally had a face-off situation, like you said before, yeah. And then they said that they had his ankle was shattered, and it was like his foot was literally hanging off the operating table.
Weird. That's a weird thing to see. I am bad with blood and guts when it comes to like people breaking, like when Sid Vicious broke his leg when he did that.
Oh God!
So I watched that shit. I see people playing college football when then like they're trying to kick like a fucking football, and the defender runs into his foot and got bent backwards. I'm like, oh. I can't watch that shit. I feel it right here, like right everywhere. Like I feel it everywhere.
I still can't watch Sid Vicious breaking his leg.
It's hard, man.
I can't.
I watched it once and I was like, oh dear God.
The fucking rule of the world. I'm like, shit.
I've seen it. I've seen it a couple times, and it's like because it's like they'll show something like Darkside of the Ring, or they'll show some stupid shit where I'm like, oh no, I didn't want to see that. Or I'll go back and I'll watch the fucking pay-per-view and I'll think about it. And they're like, okay, Vicious in the match. Okay. Oh!
Oof. And then, so of course, afterwards, they say they're going to fuse it into a walking position. They said he would not be able to run or even wrestle again. And now Brian is in tears because he's thinking, I just fucked up my life. My career is over. I'm not going to make the big money. And his sister just wants him to be grateful that he's alive.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. When he fell out of the Humvee, which we didn't cover, when he fell out, he got ejected out through the moonroof because he wasn't wearing a safety belt. And like instead of him like a clear coming out, he hit the top of that roof, which fucked him up.
And they said he was taking medication, and he was like in top. So
he was like falling asleep like every other week. He was like wrecking fucking rentals, week after week. I wouldn't rent one. I'm sorry, Brian. You're amazing, but I am not gonna rent you a car. I know your history.
And the thing is, people thought he was like on the influence, and of course, because anytime a wrestler gets in an accident, they automatically assume alcohol. They assume that, and they said no.
It's a Trido story. So
it wasn't any hardcore drugs.
So it's gonna be something. It's a narrative that's been told many times. So of course we're always gonna assume that, you know.
Yeah, but the thing is, he wasn't on any hardcore drugs. He was just on muscle relaxers and pain pills that he was normally taking.
But it's still like a drug nonetheless. So because
it is. Yeah.
If you don't take it, and then you start taking it, it's kind of like okay. But you start abusing it like anything else. If it's done in moderation, it's done perfect. You can handle it. Yeah. When it comes when you abuse it, that's when it gets bad. So, I mean, we can't really tell. Was he abusing at the time? Because from the whole storyline so far, he was abusing pretty much all the stuff that he can pretty much.
Yeah. And because he didn't have, and the thing is, so he was going 70 miles an hour when he crashed.
Yeah.
And like they said, he instantly became Evel Knievel. And like you said, he said he shot out like a bullet, and it shot him 50 feet away from the vehicle, and would end up doing 2 end-over-end flips.
Okay, we don't need a skateboarding terminology on here. He flipped over a couple times. We get it. We get it, man.
Yeah. And then he came home from the hospital. Brittany was terrified because she went to give him a gift and couldn't recognize him. Brian Jr. remembers seeing the bolt screwed into his leg and how sick it looked. And Danny remembers him being so exhausted and run down, but she was too young to understand what was really going on with him and how ragged his life had become. So, of course, like we said before, everyone's convinced because of the loose cannon gimmick, there's no accident. It's all work. And he was trying to keep the severity of it down as much as possible. He'd tell people, I'm fine. I'll be back in a few months. And doctors are like, no, you're not.
And here's the thing. I guess, based on the conversation, she wanted to go back to WCW. He was just simply trying to get his stock up.
Yeah, so but WCW always has that exit clause where they can get rid of your ass.
Yeah.
And as soon as he proved that he couldn't wrestle the way he used to,
he couldn't do it. Because they offer more money at WCW, which is a better thing, but they know for sure,
But WWE offered guaranteed money.
Guaranteed money. So
they said guaranteed 3 years, you're here.
Yeah.
And if they send him home, they still got to pay him. Mm-hmm. That's guaranteed money. That's what the guaranteed money is that even if they fire you or release you, they still have to pay you. It's if you quit or breach your contract that you don't get paid. And Brian was not about to quit. So he went with the guaranteed money, took the shot, went to WWE, and he's still rehabbing for his injuries, and he's doing the loose cannon thing in full force, and it's like he's still a madman, but when he came home, he still had an IV. He would literally unhook the IV, go do a show, come back home, hook the IV right back in.
I mean, you're kind of stuck in a predicament. You put so much time and effort, and you put yourself out there so much to get your brand over. That's before branding was even a thing.
Yeah.
So he got himself over. I mean, the fact that, A, He went from WCW. He's in cahoots with Eric Bischoff, Eazy-E, right? He goes to ECW, and it's kind of funny because like it's almost like Brian Pillman and Stunning Steve were like, even though they were Hollywood Blondes, they kind of like almost follow each other's footsteps, but in a different way. Yeah. Because Brian went to ECW, Stunning Steve Austin went as Steve Austin over to ECW, and did his whole shtick, whatever. So he's in this little negotiation trying to get over there. Finally makes it to the WWE, and things just fucking went bad. Like the whole accident kind of fucked him up. Because
he tried to wrestle the way he could, and he couldn't do it anymore.
No.
He was able to get through some of the matches because he had some wrestling knowledge, but this is the thing about Brian Pillman, and I say it a lot all the time. If he could have been smart enough at that time to be more of a worker and less of a flyer, he probably would have lasted. If he was smart enough to do, because here's the thing. If you got a good enough personality, and we've seen this with more people, and we'll talk about this in the future, I'm sure, you can do less and still get over. If you've got a good enough personality, and you've got good enough psychology, and you're good enough at getting emotion from the crowd, you don't have to jump around.
Well, we've seen it. I mean, Daniel Bryan is a prime example. He had to stop doing certain things so that he can continue wrestling.
Yeah.
And he's phenomenal at it. It very well can happen. Edge cannot do the same things he used to do, but he's great in in-ring psychology, and he puts on a consistent match. All because of that injury, he had to learn to wrestle differently.
That's true. I mean, like, here's the thing about Brian, too, right? So if he, like, swallowed his pride and figured out, okay, I can't do it, especially in that moment, he should be like, okay, I can't do this. If I can't wrestle, he was intuitive enough to where he knew how to maneuver certain things around and manipulate certain situations with the character. I think that if you couldn't wrestle anymore, stick to that desk job. Sit there and do the announcements for a bit. Get everything else. But with the certain crop of wrestlers coming in, especially with faction and warfare they're having with like the ministry and all these different people, I would love to see Brian Pillman be a head of a faction, be the mouthpiece, and having his minions behind him. I mean, that could have been a storyline they could have done, but he was so egotistical to a point where he had to get himself over with his wrestling ability, although it was gone. I would imagine a scenario or a universe where Brian didn't go through an accident and then maybe just did like the loose cannon thing, whatever, and having his people follow him as this crazy, like almost like a Raven's flock, but people are just crazy about this crazy Brian Pillman character. Yeah. And they'll do anything just to amuse him.
The bottom line is Brian Pillman was his own worst enemy. And, of course, he had the upcoming surgery coming up to keep him out of in-ring action. So, and again, this is how they do. This is how they used to do things. Nowadays, when someone's injured, they're not even on TV. But back then, they were still very much in the heart of kayfabe. So it's like, okay, Brian Pillman's injured. He can't do much. How do we still present him on TV? Well, they bring out his old partner. This is Steve Austin. Now he's got the bald head, the Stone Cold that we all know. Mm-hmm. And he's coming out to the ring.
The good old ring master.
And he's got the chain around his neck. And that's the thing. That chain that Austin always wore around his neck is the same Hollywood blonde chain that Brian Pillman gave him. He never took it off. Anytime you saw him in the ring with a chain, he was wearing that because, and he never mentioned this, he mentions it in his book, but he never mentioned it, obviously, in the rings that killed his gimmick, was that because that still was a part of him. Like, that was him and Brian. So, but he would go out to the ring, and then he's doing the interview with Stone Cold, and Stone Cold knows, I got to get my heat, and I got to make this look good. So he beats the crap out of Pillman in the ring. Like, takes the cane, snaps it, the handle goes flying into the crowd.
Yeah, I think he said, like, the top of it went flying into the crowd.
Because
he
smacked him in the ankle so hard.
He smacked him so hard, yeah.
But the thing is, he hit him hard enough to make a point, but not hard enough to injure him. But he knew it had to look brutal. And here's the thing, because they were such good friends, Austin was allowed to do that. Most of the time, when you're working stiff with somebody like that, you won't do it unless you trust that other person.
Or know that person at least.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
So that's why they've always said the people who were friends outside the ring had the best feuds in the ring because they trust each other enough to be like, hey, lay it in. Lay it in.
Whoop my ass.
Yes. As Eddie Griffin would say, whoop my ass, give me my cash. So they go out there and they literally takes that chair, puts it in front of his leg, and Des pointed something out, and I'll let him say this in a second. He takes the leg out, and then Austin just stomps on the chair and injuring his leg, and you brought something interesting up.
I'm not gonna say it was, but I think that was like the first time that they had used that particular attack, the way using the chair to stomp on an ankle like that.
Because I say, to my knowledge, I don't know any time in the 80s or 90s they really did that.
I can't recall anything like that myself.
I'm saying now it's so common.
It's overdone now.
They use it and they still sell it as brutal. They sell it as brutal, so that's good.
Yeah.
That's one of the few things that from the 90s has stayed brutal all the way to today. But it's one of those moments where you're sitting there like it was something that wasn't done then. So when he stomped on it, and everybody's like, "Holy shit!"
And it looked pretty good too. I mean, like, you know, you can see like where he put the pressure on one leg and not the other, but at the same time, like, he sold the shit out of it. And the thing is, like, the execution from obviously Austin, and you know the execution of pain, because I'm pretty sure Pillman didn't have to reach too far to get that emotion of his legs being broken or whatever. Because he's like the Hulk. I'm always angry. Well, Pillman's like, I'm always hurt.
Yeah.
I'm always in pain.
And because he sold it, and the announcers went, he re-injured the ankle. So all that combined got them to where, okay, Brian now has a reason to not wrestle. So they took that away. So that way, get your surgery, heal your body, and then when it's time, we'll put you back in the ring. So that's what they were doing. And they even call it now Pillmanizing a body part. That's now got his own term now, where you focus on one thing and you just beat the shit out of it. And it worked, because Austin got his heat, because it was in Cincinnati, the hometown of Brian Pillman. Yeah. Very well executed. And then they're doing all the edgier content, and they tried to do the one segment that even in the Attitude Era, they were like, this is fucked up. The home invasion.
I thought that was a cool angle. Sorry.
I went back and watched that shit, and I'm just sitting like, holy shit, dude. Kaboom! I'm like, oh, what just happened? And the camera cuts out, and you're sitting like, oh, I gotta wait another episode for this? Luckily for me, I was watching on the WWE Network, so I was like, click.
But again, that was a key element to wrestling, was not just to entertain and to do all this other stuff, but tune in next week.
That totally brought attention. I remember seeing the apology the week after, and I was like, that's kind of unnecessary, because, like, I mean, they were pushing the envelope, but the thing is, those other TV shows in that time period where they kind of almost follow the same thing. I know they had, like, a suicide one on Beverly Hills 90210. They had a similar thing where some guy had a gun or whatever. I think they had one on Degrassi as well, too. So there was a lot of TV shows that were kind of, like, doing the same thing, and I'm not sure if it was, like, they were the first one to do it. But I thought the angle was pretty cool. He came out with a fucking gun on a wrestling show, so you weren't turning away from that. Like, that thing was pretty fucking awesome. And then, like, everybody got pissed off. I'm like, that... I was like, why were you mad about that? Like, that was a good angle. I thought it was pretty good.
It was good. It was shock value. Some people, even people in the business, didn't like it because they thought it was a bit much. But I'm like, Brian Pillman's a nutcase. Austin's breaking into his home.
Yeah.
Again... If someone breaks into your house and you have a gun, you're gonna point it at the person.
Here's the thing. Ask a man from Texas what happens when you go on his property. Ask Steve Austin if someone walked into his fucking Broken Ranch skull and tried to come terrorize his house. What would Stone Cold Steve Austin do? Well, first I have a beer. I have 2 beers. I have a Jaeger. I have some tequila. Get my shotgun. Put 1 bullet. 2 bullets. What? 2 bullets? What? Cock the son of a bitch? What? And blow his fucking brains off? What? Walk a mud hole in his asshole? What? He's from Texas.
Exactly. And
sorry.
Pillman.
What?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure in Cincinnati they would have that shit too. I think Cincinnati's another crazy.
Stand your ground. I mean, like, I'm sorry, you're gonna come into my house. I know it's televised, but at the same time, like, you had a Glock 9mm. That's cool, man. But imagine more effective. You had a shotgun. Holy shit!
Oh, yeah.
Like the whole putting the stuff in there, closing it,
and that's true.
Cocking it.
He had a 9mm Glock, which of course begs the question: did he buy it from Arn Anderson?
Oh shit! You mean armed Anderson? It's Armed Anderson, motherfucker.
That's the new name now. Oh god, sorry. That's just a little joke I had to throw in there.
For your wrestling fans, if you guys are not wrestling fans, what are you watching? You're watching 3 dudes talk about something you have no idea about.
But you're entertained. So anyway, my point is...
Armed Anderson was there and handed a gun to Brian Pillman. Go on.
He pulled out the Glock and splattered his brains. No, he didn't. But...
Oh, wait. Was that a... That was the thing about Brian Pillman. He's like, someone breaks into your house. You bring out a 9mm. Was that a reference to Brian Pillman?
I don't know.
Holy shit, I gotta ask him.
We gotta figure that out. But that was epic. And then, of course, Melanie's screaming. Austin gets in the house. Austin later, the show goes to black, and everything was great. And then eventually, Brian got back in the ring, and he was working matches, but it was in a lot of pain. And for some, it was sad to watch because he wasn't the same guy. But then he said, like, the pain, he getting frustrated because the pain pills he was taking for the pressure to provide his family. And he's trying to, like, get everything together because he knows.
He's right there.
He's right there.
He's, like, right there. Like, this is here. He's right there.
Yeah.
With a little, there we go.
And it was like the thing we said before. He tried to be his old self, but he just couldn't do it. It's like, again, if he had wrestled smarter, not harder, he could have stayed longer. I don't think he would he have been the champion? Probably not. But he would have been there long enough to where he probably could have stayed a few more years, could have provided more for his family, wouldn't have to take the pills as much. He could cut back.
Hey, wasn't Pillman with the Heart Foundation for a little stint?
Yes.
He was, because like he was
trained by them.
He was trained by them too. So
in
like,
the dungeon.
Yeah,
He did Canadian Stampede Wrestling. He was one of those guys.
No. I know he was one of the Stampede guys, whatever. But like, I think I never put two and two together. So yeah, when he joined, I'm like, okay, that's kind of a weird thing. Yeah, Bret Hart was like super serious and hates Americans, and British Bulldog was just sitting there just holding coffee for people.
And the thing is, he was rushing through everything, trying to get back as fast as possible, and he didn't let things recoup properly, so eventually got an infection in his ankle, and that affected his wrestling, and Brian couldn't even get through the airport. He was a man's man, so people just assumed whatever the problem was, he had it under control.
But he couldn't even walk to the fucking airport.
He couldn't. And he said Austin saw the writing on the wall, but because he held him in such a high regard, he thought everything was going to be just fine. Mm-hmm. Which, I'm like, okay, fair enough. You hold him in a high regard. But Steve, you're best friends with the guy. If anybody could pull him to the side and go, dude, something's wrong, it could have been Steve.
That's true.
I feel like Steve could have been the one guy to do this. I mean, granted, Jim Ross was a friend of his. Jim Cornette was a friend of his. But I feel like him and Austin were so close. If Steve pulled him to the side and go, dude, you got to get it together, bro.
At least grab him by the gold chain and be like, bro.
You're letting this opportunity slip by. You're rushing it. You're really going to hurt yourself. I mean, I feel like Austin. I'm not saying I blame Austin because I don't.
I don't.
But I'm saying I feel like he could have done something.
Well, at the same time, it's like, you have people, like, let's say with certain diseases, like from drinking or drugs or whatever the situation is, you can tell them a million times. Or someone, like, who's fucking up. We have a friend in our group of circles who constantly fucks up, and we tell him to get his life together. And the thing is, when that person's not ready, it doesn't matter if you can tell them a million times or 100 times every time you see that person. They're not going to do it until they're fucking ready. So, I mean... But the thing is, like, how can you tell a person? That person has to figure out for themselves. They're grown adults. Yeah,
and it got to the point where he was telling his wife stuff about, something happens to me, move back to Atlanta, take the kids, and find somebody, move on, find somebody to be their dad. She's like, why are you talking like that? Like, it drove him, like she drove him nuts. And in some cases, there are some guys who think that when they're gonna die. Like, be happy, move on, let the, take the kids, go here, like, so... Some people get confused when they say shit like that, but a lot of guys are on the brink of death, or feel like they're on the brink of death, they're going to say something like that.
Yeah.
Because they just want to make sure everybody's taken care of and happy, so you're not sitting around wondering. And then, of course, he was fucked up. He goes to the coach's house.
Fucked up. He's got a needle, like he's got like marks on his arms.
Oh yeah, he was fucked up on growth hormone. He snapped and said, "I'm done with this. You have to the count of 10 to get the fuck off my property. My kids are upstairs sleeping. Don't ever come here in this state." And him and a bunch of Brian's friends went to Jim Ross and said he needed to intervene because Brian was too out of control.
Yeah. That's true.
And that's when you're fucked up. When your own buddy's like, "Get the fuck off my property." That should have been a wake up call, right?
He's like, "I'm not telling you can't come back. Just fucking get sober."
Yeah. And a lot of people got pushed to that point, like that. And here's the thing: you can be the best of friends with somebody, but but at some point you gotta be like, "Hey, get your shit together." And Lord knows I've had to do that a few times. Okay.
I had to do a couple times too. To put people in place and just tell them like, "Hey, you're kind of fucking up. I need you to do something better." Not have a gentle touch and just be stern with them. I mean, with our friends, we have to be stern with them. Sometimes you have to pull away and not talk to them and say, "Hey, you're fucking up," and then do better. And not just say it, do it.
I had, I did it. And
I think we've all had to do it. I think we all did it in our lives. Yeah. And if you're an adult, you've had friends where you've known for a long time and they're fine for a while, but then they go on this slippery slope where you just see them going bad. you could tell them, but if they don't want to listen, then that's on them. Don't fuck up your life because of them. You can sit there and kind of sway them a certain way, but as what his friends are. His true friends are the people who have stepped up, and I think Jim Ross, he did the right thing. He got with them. He got him a drug test and said, "Hey, we're drug testing him." Brian Pillman's freaking out. It's like, what the fuck? And he kept, when
he felt betrayed.
He felt betrayed, but at the same time, like, when you're a person in that kind of state, you'll sit there and say, "Well, it's not me. There's other people who's worse than I am."
Yeah, and he was doing that.
And he wants to sit there. He wants to justify his actions and what he's doing. And because he had a goal, and that goal was not met yet, so he wanted to get there, and he feels like the one person who's supposed to be my friend is actually backstabbing me. Well, really, he helped him out.
He's trying to save his life.
Yeah, so JR did the right thing, and a lot of people would sit there and give him shit about it, but I think he did the right thing. Brian, he needed help, and the thing is, like, he was so far gone, he needed help. So at the same point, like, he definitely needed it. If it wasn't going to be Steve, it wasn't going to be anybody else, Jim Cornette or anybody else, Jim Ross did the right thing.
Yeah, and JR even admits, he said he failed to get him off the pills, and he failed to convince him to be a bigger star in other areas of wrestling. So Jim Ross puts the blame on himself, and that's a pattern in Darkside of the Ring, which we'll talk about in a later episode. JR puts a lot of blame on himself.
He does. That's a hard thing.
He carries that burden.
There's a reason he was head of talent relations in WWE.
Yeah.
There's a reason because he spent so much time with the stars. He spent so much time building the stars. He got close to them. He knew their insides out. He knew them better than their families knew them. And so when things go wrong, he took it to heart.
And then it happens. October 5th, 1997, at the Kiel Center in St. Louis, Missouri. Brian is at In Your House, Bad Blood. We all know this pay-per-view. It was the... I don't want to go into it, but to let you guys know, this was the Hell in a Cell and the debut of Kane was when this happened. Brian was scheduled to wrestle. Now, the call time for wrestlers back then was 1 p.m. Sometimes guys would be late, especially the stars. Some people would oversleep, miss their flight, traffic, etc. By 5 p.m., everyone was accounted for except for Brian. And that was egregiously late to be for a pay-per-view. If you show up like after 5 o'clock, that's fucked up. But usually the call time was 1 p.m. But again, people would show up late all the time. All the time. But then, Bruce Pritchard asked Jim Cornette to call around and find out where he might be. Jim called the hotel in Minneapolis to see what time he checked out. The guy went to check, and the guy said, "Brian's dead." He goes, "Is this a prank? Is this a rib?" And the guy says, "No, sir, the police are here."
Yeah.
Jim calls for Bruce. Bruce shows up and takes over the phone call because Jim was too distraught. Even to this day, he has a hard time talking about that moment.
Yeah, that's a fucking fucked up phone call. And again, it's one of those, the boy who cried wolf. It's like, is it a rib? I mean, did he hire the cops? Is he friends with the cops? And see what's going on? And, he's supposed to have a match. And, I mean, that was important too. But
this is one of those deals where, Brian Pillman, as far as real injuries is gone, has always been straightforward with him. Got an accident? Yeah, he was injured. He didn't fake that shit. Now, he hid how much he was hurt, but he still showed up and did what he was supposed to do.
35 years old when he died. And like they said, even Brian Jr. thought it was a work. He was the only one in the family not crying.
He's looking for the cameras. He's looking for something. Yeah, he's like, he's here, right? Like, I mean, yeah. It's hard for a kid, too. I mean, when you have a death in the family, especially a parent, it's kind of like, you can't comprehend because, how do you comprehend it? Like, us being adults, we've had some friend or some relative or someone who's died, so we learn coping mechanisms to get there. He's a kid. He's like, I don't know how to get this, and plus, my dad's a prankster, so I think this is all a fucking lie. And then, like, the brass tacks of it's like, oh, he's really fucking gone. Holy shit. Yeah. So it's like a deal of relaxation. Then it hits you like a ton of bricks. Boom.
Yeah. And Vince McMahon announces it the next night on Raw. They gave him the 10 bell salute like they always do. Mm-hmm. Austin got emotional during the time. I think that's why they probably didn't pan to him on camera. It would have been weird to see Austin crying.
Yeah, the whole
especially considering they just had him whoop the fuck out of him.
Yeah,
and plus he's cold-hearted and everything else. He's sitting there crying. That wouldn't be a good look.
So then Vince asks Melanie to appear on camera.
That was fucking weird.
She agreed, but asked him not to talk about drugs because she doesn't know yet how he died. First thing, he brings up his medication. Melanie ignores it and talks about Brian. However, she wanted to slap Vince.
This is one of those deals where Vince doesn't know where to draw the line sometimes.
Okay, now I'm sure at this point y'all are probably confused, like, wait, what the fuck just happened? 1 minute we were on the couch, 1 minute we were over here. We had to do a little bit of a time cut on this one, because as we're finishing, the rest of the fam walked into the house, and...
it took Desmond away.
Yes.
It pulled him away.
Yes, he had to go carve a pumpkin with his son.
You guys know, it's like, it's mid-October, and, when pumpkins comes, and it's time for carvings, you have to do things with the kids. So we are just going to pursue forward without Desmond. He gave us his blessing, so we're going to do just that. So we're going to bring the content live from Desmond's room, but without Desmond, because he's in the other room carving some pumpkins. So
absolutely.
So starting from there, Vinny, Boochie, where do we leave off?
Well, we had Melanie was on TV talking about Pillman's death, and she said she wasn't pressured to do it, and that she doesn't remember a lot of it. For reasons we're going to get into in a minute. Yeah. A lot of people found it unsettling. JR said it was only done to pop a rating. And Cornette said Vince should have just sent her a check for $100,000 and kept her ass off TV.
I would have been fine with that aspect, too. I don't think she should have been on there. There's nothing like you're really going to gain any traction. Was Vince trying to sit there and say, well, it wasn't us or anything else? It wasn't because he was young and he was a wrestler. Because I think he had to deal with a whole bunch of that stuff already. I think he's trying to cover his own ass and try to sit there and... jump on the bandwagon. It's like, okay, well, this happened. It wasn't me. It was all him. That's why he threw it out there. And then he could look at Melanie and say, okay, well, I can manipulate the situation and, maybe get something out of her.
Yeah.
I thought it was weird. I didn't really care for it. I just don't like Melanie. So, even now after watching, I was like, man, good for Brian for, we'll get into later on, Junior or whatever, reconcile and everything else. But at the same time, like, that's a parent thing. But just, I don't care for her, man.
Yeah, like I said, nobody really does. And, it was later revealed that the cause of Brian Pillman's death was heart disease.
It was. So it wasn't like what everybody usually thinks. It's drugs or something like that, though it's heart attack.
I mean, the drugs might have played a role in
it,
but the final cause was heart disease. He didn't overdose on pills. Or anything like that, but it contributed, but it wasn't the final cause.
It exasperated him.
Absolutely. Now, Vince and Jim Ross went to the funeral. There was a camera crew there, but Brian's sister kicked them out. Yeah. She kicked out the camera crew, but let Vince and JR stay.
That's a weird thing for her to pull off and say, bring a camera in there. Why would you do that? Why would you do that if you care for the man?
I think it's because at the time, WWE loved to document everything. Like even now, when you see with the 24 thing they do and all the other stuff on the network, there's always cameras behind the scenes picking shit up. I get that,
but still, that's a you don't do that, man.
You don't. You don't. It was in bad taste. I agree with that. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that's probably the logical way that they're thinking.
I'm thinking the same thing. Yeah. I don't think it was the right time, right place.
It's not.
Given that, I would take Cornette's advice, when it comes to it. Cut her a check, say he'll get some royalties if we sell anything with his merch or whatever, something in a video game later on, whatever the situation is, but just cut your losses, man.
Yeah. And Melanie did get the royalties.
Yes, she
and
did.
Everything. And the kids held it together better than the adults did. Melanie spiraled out of control. She got royalty checks from Brian's legacy, as you mentioned before, and she eventually remarried, and the stepfather was abusive toward the kids. Yeah. Brian Pillman said he had dogs that were just as abusive as the stepfather, and Brian was grounded, the dogs would guard the bedroom so he couldn't leave. Yep. You got these big-ass pit bull dogs standing right outside your door, blocking you, and... He said Brian wasn't very athletic because he had no one to play catch with. He had a GameCube, but his stepdad would take it and throw it against the wall.
Yep. His only, escape from... It's like, imagine growing up having everything. Everything hand and foot, pretty much. Every toy, every shoe, everything is good. And then all of a sudden, electricity gets turned off, your water gets turned off from time to time, not knowing when your next meal is going to come. You see your mom just, schlepping with a whole bunch of different people, all the time, coming from bars, and... the guy she was with that stepdad who was freaking horrible. She had bad choice. She struck gold with Brian because he was a good, genuine guy. And, when she had to go fend for herself, she just, any cock will do.
Yeah.
It's just weird, man. I was I get it. Some people go through a weird depression thing, whatever. I get that. But with her personality, she was so prone to, all the drugs and drinking. And don't get me wrong, I drink as much as the next person, but I don't do it in excess. I don't sit there and hide away from it. Yeah. Even with the drugs, for that, when I was younger, I did a lot of shit in excess, but you grow up from it and you get past it. You don't sit there and go down this rabbit hole where it literally sucks your life down and it sucks the life of your kids. And from that point, if you have kids and they're not your main focus when it comes after this, being there for them, being supportive, because two things happen when a death happens. Either you're going to be super supportive and grow out of it and try to persevere on, or you go down a spiral. And, I mean, there's no other real way to go past it. I mean, you can sit there and mope and do everything else, but eventually you'll snap out of it. Some people do, some people don't. But at the same time, you'll sit there and drag the lives of some kids who are looking up to you. It's like, hey, you're the fucking adult. Like, do something. Like, why are you with this piece of shit?
And not just that, when a kid loses one of their parents, whether it's divorce, whether it's death or anything, they're leaning on you at that point.
Yeah.
Like, you have to understand, you're all they got. They don't have the other parent for whatever reason. Couldn't handle the pressure. She should have got a friend to help her, rather than this.
But not only that, though, she was so high and powerful when the money was coming in with Brian, and she wanted all the kids. She would have power over Rochelle, not seeing the daughter and everything else. But when she had to do it for herself, she didn't want to do it. And the thing is, like, it's proof in the pudding. You can't see anything else. She did not step up. She stepped down. She tried to opt out.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, they have this great person. Now, Brian, again, not a great husband, great father, right? We talked about many times.
Yes.
But at the same token, like, you have this guy, you're supposed to have another mold like that to be in his kids' lives, but instead what they did was they brought, like, the worst person. Of course, he couldn't be interviewed because he's a piece of shit. He would look like a piece of shit. There'd be memes about him to this day. But still, like, you're supposed to fill that void with something better, and if it's not there, then get the fuck out. Like, I mean... She was a gold digger. Let's face it, she was. But she could have found another person that was kind of like in the same lineage or something like that. But I just feel like, I think Brian went after her and she's like, okay, well, he's got money, so I'll stick around and see what happens.
Yeah, and Brian and Brittany were the ones that got the worst of it because they stayed with Melanie. Danielle went with her mother.
Of course.
So she got out of there. And then the siblings started to drift apart, but then Aunt Linda would get them together once or twice a month so they wouldn't lose contact. So now they all get to hang out, they get to get along. Brittany says Linda's the closest thing she has to a mom. Because obviously she lost her mom and Melanie was never a mom to her.
Yeah.
And at one point in the documentary, Brian Jr. freaks out because there's a spider in the bathtub.
Yeah.
That was kind of funny. Like, the Aunt Linda's being interviewed and you hear Brian Pillman Jr. going, what the fuck? Because apparently he hates spiders and Linda won't kill anything. She takes them outside when she finds them.
Yeah, that's what Marie does. She, like, gets a cup and she puts a piece of paper underneath and walks it outside. And she's like, oh, you're afraid of spiders. I'm like, I'm not afraid of them. I want to kill them all. So if they're in my house, like, you're not living rent-free in my house. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. I see a spider in my house, I'm killing the son of a bitch.
I mean, I don't care if it's my hand, my finger. I'll punch him. Pop, just...
I'm staging war.
What's even worse, like, you try to punch a spider, he stops your hand and twists you around.
Yeah.
Anyways, go ahead.
Now, Melanie, she said that she loves Linda and what she's done for the kids, and she hopes the kids can forgive her one day.
I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
I would never. There's no way. I don't care. You could be sorry, but you're gonna spend the rest of your life, and it's great that Brian Jr. decided to forgive her. And I think for him, it did incredible things. Like, my dad did a whole bunch of things that was horrible when I was a kid, and he apologized to me, which was awesome. And I'm fine with it because me and him had a rocky relationship, and we got past a lot of different things. We actually had a real talk. But Brian is probably more inclined to sit there and forgive her because that's the biological mom, right? Yeah. But I mean, for the rest of the kids, there's no way. Brian. A lot of people say, well, I would never forgive her because of the things she's done. And I could easily say I would never as well, too, because I look at her now, and I'm like, you are reaping what you're sowing. And I don't want to wish ill upon anybody else because, Brian Jr. seems like a really legit nice guy.
He really
talk
is.
to him, like, he's so grateful. He's so, like, he's so thoughtful. I've seen, like, him on backstage shoot, videos on, on YouTube, whatever.
I saw him backstage at a show a few weeks back. I didn't get to say hello to him, but I saw him back there talking.
Yeah, he seems like a legit, like, good guy, whatever. He's very, like... sympathetic, he's very like, I'm lucky to be here, I'm happy to be here, I know about my past, about my parents, but I'm here, I'm doing my own thing. He seems like a genuine good guy. And Melanie, she just seems like she was on top of the world, she fucked it up, and now she wants to get back and good graces, maybe to be taken care of, because now she's getting older.
Yeah.
Like, who's going to take care of her? And she's probably looking out for herself again.
Could be.
She's literally just looking out for herself. She couldn't do it by herself. She didn't have the education to do what she's supposed to. She had a certain skill set back in the day. She used it. She got what she wanted. And now that skill set's gone, and she has to make it on her own. And it's really fucking hard. And the people that loved you, you kind of toss it aside. You treat them like shit because you don't know what the fuck you're doing because you're fucked up on a bunch of things. So I don't give two shits about Melanie. I really don't, and I don't know wish on anybody else, but she was a horrible fucking parent. Even if she tells like the other kids like, hey, I'm sorry, I wish I'd done things different. You can't. Like, you said horrible things to make Rochelle kill herself, and it's solely on you.
Yeah. If I was Brittany, I wouldn't forgive her.
I mean, it's solely...
If I was Brittany, I wouldn't. I can't speak for the rest of the kids, but I know Brittany, if I wouldn't blame her.
You're in a power trip, like, for no reason, because you felt like you had control, and you fucked up kids' lives, you fucked up your kids' lives, other kids' lives, and everybody you touched after Brian died, you poisoned the well for anybody who's ever thought, at least even come close to you.
Yeah. Although I will say this about Brian Pillman. There's a quote here that I want to read, because when people asked him, how were you able to forgive her, this is what he said. He says, I could spend the rest of my life hating her, but where does that get me?
Yeah.
He's been happier in his personal life ever since he reconnected with his mom. He said it's made him better in his relationships with women because he's seen more people's plights and people's vices and has been a much more mature adult in general. So in the long run, it made him a better person to forgive her. Mm-hmm. So there is one advantage to that.
No, it is. I mean, like, you let go, because the thing is, you have a lot of people who hold on to hate, like, daddy issues, mommy issues, whatever situation. People grow up a certain way, and if you hold on to it, like, it makes yourself bitter. Yeah. It makes you not trusting. It makes you not want to trust other people, and, like, you live this whole constant thing, whatever. So I think that it's good for him that if it helped him get through a couple things. Yeah, he may have forgiven her, but it's still going to have it there. It's kind of like me lying to you and saying, I'm sorry I lied to you. Okay, cool. But every time I tell you something, even though I apologize and everything else, but sometimes you can take my word as a grain of salt, like, is he telling the truth?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
And I will say this. I don't want to get religious, but I'm just saying this because it's a quote from a pastor. Mm-hmm. So I'm just prefacing this. This guy, Bishop E. Jakes, and again, I'm not being religious, it's just a quote from him. He was talking about forgiveness on Steve Harvey's talk show. And he actually said that the secret to forgiveness is the forgiveness is not for them. It's for you. What he means by that is, like, when you forgive, it means that I'm not going to hold on to this anymore. I'm not going to think about this anymore. I'm done. He even says, like, I've forgiven a lot of people, but just because I forgive them doesn't mean I trust them. It just means I'm done holding on to the hate and thinking about it and letting it eat me alive.
Wow, that's really deep, Vinny.
Yeah, it was about letting the past go. So I think that's ultimately what Brian was doing, and I think it formed a mother-son's relationship out of that. But I think that's what it was more about. And Brittany laughed at the thought because of him being a wrestler. Because then Brian Pillman, as we know, decides to get into the wrestling business. What the fuck? Like, and of course everybody's reaction was, oh my god, which Melanie had the right reaction. Because you see what somebody's dad goes through and then a kid wants to get into the business.
It's kind of like, whoa.
It's like, dude.
It's like Benoit's kid, It's like, whoa.
Yeah, exactly. Except he's got a bigger hill to climb. But Pillman's like wanting to get in there, and then JR, I think, gave him the best advice. He said, your dad contributed a lot of good to this business, but there were also things about him that weren't good. He said, you need to embrace the passion, the intellect, the athletic ability, but don't be a loose cannon. And today, like I said, he's with the Varsity Blondes. He wishes he could have had a solid relationship with his dad, but it motivates him to be a father one day and try to be a better one.
It's like the Joker thing, with Heath Ledger, getting so involved in there. But no, I can totally see.
But yeah, and this is the dude who graduated college, quit his job, and went straight into the business.
Yeah.
The gamble paid off. He was in MLW. He was doing some indie stuff for a while. AEW is now on the horizon, and him and Jungle Man, Griff Garrison, as I like to call him,
yep.
They are now the Varsity Blondes.
Yep.
And they deserve better, but I like the exposure they're getting now on AEW.
I'll talk to TK later.
Yeah. I really felt they should have won that tournament a while back.
That's okay.
But
bygones. I think Brian was good, but he wasn't there all the time, and I don't know. I think it's gonna be good. This wrapped up a lot of good things. After seeing this, though, definitely Melanie, you're dead. I mean, I'm sorry. To me, you're dead. I just feel like I'm a compassionate person. I usually give a million people a chances to get things taken care of.
Lord knows I've done the same.
But the thing is, like, I just don't think that it's going to take a lot of building up. But even then, like, even if she gets close to it, maybe closer when she's closer to being dead. But I mean, that's just, you wrecked people's lives and you can't come back from it. You saw one big devastation after devastation, and to me, you're done. Brian Pillman Jr. is doing great. The girls are doing great. Linda's doing great. It looks like they're all reconciled. They're all like having their family time and starting something new, because this has been like a rock they've been carrying on their shoulders for all these years, and it's finally coming off, and it's like, okay, I feel better, because you could talk to a friend about these kind of things, and sometimes it's kind of hard to push it off to the side and say, okay, it's fucking done. but releasing it into the public, into a documentary, and telling all the stories, if it wasn't like finalized and got all that pressure off their shoulders, it definitely did now. So hopefully this did a whole bunch of wonders. Melanie, I don't think you're gonna listen to this because why would you? But if you did, man, I think you know the air's every way. It's not gonna be great. It's got a long climb. You might be able to do it, but I don't know, man. I don't know you. So if you could make it happen, fantastic. If it can't, I mean, you just have to live through your own fucking torment. I mean, you got yourself in that boat. You got to pal yourself out.
Absolutely. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will wrap up this episode of Boochcast Reviews Darkside of the Ring. As always, Desmond's, like I said, he's out carving pumpkins with his son, but I appreciate him taking time to be here. Elvis, I appreciate your time as well, man. Oh. And, of course, next week, oh, God, I don't want to do next week, but I have to. I have no choice. It's against my will. It's against all my principles, but I have to do it. And, of course, we're talking about the ultraviolence of Nick Gage is going to be next week. God help me. I'll be joined by the Broke Soulless Ginger Zach Scott and Gator Ricky Ross will be there with me next week. So Elvis is free from this crazy BS of next week. But make sure you guys follow the Boochcast. We're on Anchor, Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts. Links are down in the description box below. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch. The links are in the description box. And, of course, where you can help out the Boochcast, anchor.fm/theboochcast/support. You guys in the spiel by now. I ain't got to share it. But make sure you guys also hit the subscribe button, ring that bell to be notified so you don't miss any of these new episodes coming, as well as other content we're going to have coming your way. So we'll talk to you guys next week. Until then,
pizza baby!